Always, I like to make sure that when I have the chance, I get to bring in people who know a lot about the opposing team, and I'm bringing in my boy Coty. He covers not just Houston Texans, he also covers the Houston Rockets. Locked on Houston, Locked on Texans. He's also covered the Texans for SI, a bunch of stuff. The man is busy. I'm so happy I got some time to talk to him about this week's game. What I first want to get into is I think there's obviously a conversation of like how Texas fans feel about clearly Deshaun coming back, but I also think it's important to know like at this point of the year, I don't know what the expectations were for the Texans, but the record is what the record is, which I believe is what the number one pick in the draft right now.
1-9-1.
I really hope for y'all's sake that one tie does not ruin getting the number one overall pick for y'all. I really hope so for y'all. But where are fans at with that? Because I remember what it was like when the Browns were out here winning a game, or maybe two. Where's the fan base at?
They are frustrated. They are disappointed. And as this fan base been since, let's say, January 29th, 2021, which I think is the day that Deshaun Watson officially requested his trade, they're hurt. And look, I understand the Houston Texans have been a mess for an extremely long time now. But at the same time, when you take a look at what the Houston Texans came into the 2022 campaign with, there was some hope and expectation that they will finally take a step forward with their rebuild. You had Davis Mills, who at the time was this team's starting quarterback. And when you go back and take a look at the last 5 games of his rookie campaign, there was some hope and there was some promise. And everybody, including myself, was like, okay, well, if he continues to stay on this projection of development, we're not going to give him the title of being this team's franchise quarterback, but he can definitely be a quarterback that can actually help the Houston Texans win somewhere in the ballpark between 5 to 6 games. Some people, including myself, had this organization winning 7 because in the midst of all of that, you had a solid offensive line. The defense was getting better. You had arguably, if not the best collection of prospects that you ever drafted in your franchise history with Derek Stingley, Damian Pierce, John Mechie at the time before, unfortunately, he went down with leukemia, Jalen Petrie. Like, there was just so much expectation. Of course, last year with the coaching staff, it was kind of, what the hell is this? You elevate Lovie Smith to head coach, so that brings stability. You bring in Pep Hamilton, who is not only an offensive coordinator that had a pretty decent background in Indianapolis, but he's also a quarterback coach, helped the likes of Andrew Luck, Justin Herbert. Like, there was so many. Okay, there is no way in hell the Houston Texans can be as bad or worse than the product that they put on the field last year. So everyone thought, okay, this is going to be a year where they're going to move forward with their rebuild. Here we are sitting here on November 30th, 2022, with the most anticipated game probably in franchise history, with the return of Deshaun Watson, and you're sitting here thinking to yourself, how did we get here? The Houston Texans were bad last year, but there's one thing I will always say about the team last year that was led by then head coach David Culley. You never, not once, questioned their effort on the field. Over the last 2 weeks, Quincy, you're literally looking at a team where you're thinking to yourself, they're just out here to collect a paycheck. It's been that bad in the city of Houston. Everybody is fed up. Of course, it comes with a losing season, bad expectations not being met and all this. Everybody's calling for the head coaching job, offensive coordinator job, and even some people are starting to turn on general manager Nick Caserio as well. So, the fan base, everybody here in Houston, things are not looking good for the Texans, and it's going to get worse on Sunday when you have to look at Deshaun Watson playing inside NRG Stadium again. Not because of everything that happened off the field, but there's going to be a moment where everybody think to themselves, what if we still had number 4 playing for us?
It's interesting, right? Because we talked about this before we started recording. It was like the Browns and the Texans like have a lot of shared players and shared history. Where you even brought up Pep Hamilton. Pep Hamilton was the passing game coordinator under Hugh Jackson when the Browns were abysmally bad. And then we talked about like how the Brock Osweiler trade led to the Nick Chubb pick, and then the Deshaun Watson trade led to the Denzel Ward pick, and then obviously now we have given y'all back those picks with the trade again. And I think a lot of the intrigue for this game is about what is this environment going to be like in Houston, right? Because I know what it's like from just like, okay, an icon leaves your city. Like when LeBron left the Cavs, there was just normal, he left us, hanging kind of like regular sports fan kind of hatred there. But this has a added layer on top of it where it's not just about football for some people, or they can make it more than just about football for them. What do you expect that environment to be like for that game? And what are the players expecting in Houston?
Nobody can truly say, because like you mentioned, and here's the thing about the city of Houston. Deshaun isn't the first, and unfortunately, hopefully, but unfortunately, he would not be the last great superstar that, came to Houston, embraced the culture, and for one reason or another, you left the city. Before you and I jumped up on the podcast, I told you I also covered the departure of James Harden. And, James Harden was another big icon here in the city of Houston, stayed here for almost a decade, but he also, kind of had somewhat of a bad breakup with the Rockets in the city of Houston as well. But every single time he has came back as an opponent, not just for James, but for everybody, even guys like Tracy McGrady, Steve Francis, the city of Houston will always show their love and support for these guys at the end of the day. Because look, it's like, look, we hate to see you leave for one reason or another, but we understand it. We get it. We're going to show you some love and support. We appreciate what you did for our city. With Deshaun, it's a little bit, well, not a little bit, it's a lot more deeper, because not only do you have to add in the fact that all the off-field issues that really has tarnished everything about him in the city, but you also look at it from a standpoint that the Deshaun Watson era was so short. And a lot of fans also feel like they were actually robbed from an opportunity to get a true sense of Deshaun, because he was here in the city of Houston for 5 years. But I look at it as 3, because, his rookie campaign exploded on the scene, but unfortunately he tore his ACL and missed half the season. Then you have the 2018-19 season, all of a sudden you become one of the premier teams in the league. And I understand it's not because of Deshaun Watson's fault that your team, that the Texans decided to let several great players and good players and decent role players walk out the door. And of course, the biggest one of all is DeAndre Hopkins. 2020, you drop down to a 4-12. And I always tell people this all the time. Like, I truly do believe if the Texans had won 9 or 10 games that year, Deshaun would have won MVP, because he was just playing phenomenal football. I believe he threw almost 500 yards. Like, everything about that year was phenomenal. But that's it. And then the following year, you demand a trade. Off-field stuff comes into play, and everything is tarnished. So you're still going to have his supporters inside NRG Stadium who's going to cheer. But at the same time, it's unfortunate that because of everything that came out with his off-field issues, you can't really just focus on Deshaun Watson, a player, how good of a player he was. Oh, man, you left us, now we suck, because it's going to it runs deeper than the all-pro quarterback that just left. So nobody really knows what to expect. But all I can say is I hope it's a safe environment. But at the same time, he's going to get a lot of boos. And the one welcome home that I keep thinking of is LeBron James, because everyone remembers how deep that was. But once again, LeBron didn't have no off-field issues that further tarnish his legacy. So that's what makes this whole like anticipation for Sunday like, oh my God, what is this going to be like?
Yeah, and like the thing also with LeBron was like that happened at the beginning of the year, before we knew how bad the Cavs were without LeBron, right? Like there was still like I remember there was the hope. Hey, this team won 60 games last year. They're not just going to turn around and be terrible without LeBron. I think we got the number one pick like that year after we got like we were that bad, but we had no idea.
You got Kyrie after that.
Yeah, we had no idea how bad that the Cavs were going to be because of that, right? But so that allowed us to like get more energy for it. I don't know what the environment would have been if like that was after the All-Star break and the Cavs are like what, like 10 and 20 something, and then it's like, oh, now LeBron's coming to town. Like I don't know how that would work as a fan. And that's the interesting thing about this for Houston, right? Like on field, it's weird because your team has one win. You're playing against there's all this excitement about this game, but ultimately it's between the team with one win and the team with 4 wins. So I don't know if they're going to be up any more than it would unless like the crowd's like so hyped that they're like, okay, I'm going to get hyped because of this. Also, like from a fan base perspective, a lot of these fans, like I know what them 1-win seasons are like. You get beaten down by this point of the year. Like you almost don't even want to turn on football anymore because of this. And now it's like, oh, Deshaun's coming back. Like, do they all of a sudden just get back into it and like have the same enthusiasm? Or is it going to be something where it's like, it might surprise us that it might be a little bit more tame because the season has really taken a lot of the air out of the fan base for this? Or are they that mad? They're just like, nope, it don't matter. Like we still, because also another thing, like I think this would be different too if like it was 20, like this happened last year where he had just requested that trade and then gotten moved. But it's been like 2 seasons. You know what I mean? Like there's been a full kind of, well, I mean, you thought you would be in more of the rebuild right now, but you've gotten like a couple of years into this rebuild, and now Deshaun's coming back to NRG. Like, do you think any of those factors could make this to where this crazy environment we're anticipating might not be as wild as we might have thought?
No. It's funny that you asked me that because early on in the day, we had an opportunity to talk to Titus Howard, and Titus even talked about, what he's expecting inside of NRG Stadium on Sunday. And Quincy, the last time NRG Stadium was that place to be was Deshaun Watson last year in Houston, which, I mean, you can't really say that because that was also during a pandemic year, so it was like limited fans, but ever since the loss of Deshaun, J.J. Watt, and for the Texans to go to one of the premier teams to the bottom of the NFL, Quincy, I'm not lying to you, man. Nobody goes to the games anymore. And there was thoughts, maybe this year fans would show up again. After like the second, third home game of the season, fans stopped showing up. When you go to these games, it's basically a home game for the opposing team. It's like that now. So because the atmosphere and the energy has been taken out of NRG Stadium going on 2 seasons now, that's what also make, oh my God, like, what is this going to be like? Like, it's just, nobody can really put into words what that atmosphere inside NRG Stadium is going to be like come Sunday, especially when he takes the field for the very first time as an opponent. Oh man, it's going to be something to see.
So you're telling me they're not stopping the game for a video package? That's not what's about to go down.
No, hell no. No.
Oh man, I think there's also something that's interesting about this, right? Because us Brown, we really haven't seen much of Watson playing outside of like what we have gone back and watched in Houston. But you're somebody who has seen the whole Watson experience from rookie year.
It was so fun. Oh my God, it was so fun.
To everything. So kind of tell us first, what are the things about Watson that are going to make that if he translates everything that he was doing in Houston to what he does in Cleveland, where you're like, okay, these are the things that makes Watson special that maybe Browns fans don't know yet because we ain't watched him yet.
One of the best quarterbacks in the league. Like, the things he would do on the field, man, you would literally, there were several times where you would just shake your head and say, I don't know how he was able to make that play because the guy was so special. I mean, he has everything that you're looking for in a quarterback in 2022. You're talking about somebody with great pocket presence. If the pocket collapse, he could use his legs to create something out of nothing. He makes, some of the worst wide receivers, wide receivers that you never heard of. I think in 2020, the year I say he could have won MVP had the Houston Texans won more games, he had this wide receiver named Chris Hansen. And I haven't heard of Chris Hansen before. I haven't heard of Chris Hansen since. But I tell you one thing, Chris Hansen was arguably this team's second best wide receiver alongside Brandon Cooks that season. Like Deshaun, everything about him was so special. Like that was the year I said, when you take a look at the list of quarterbacks, it went Patrick Mahomes. I always say Tom Brady out of respect, which now I think I can finally take him out.
Cooked now. He lost to the Browns overtime. He's cooked now. He's done.
But I said that year top 3 quarterbacks was Patrick Mahomes, Tom Brady, and Deshaun Watson. And what I love most about Deshaun, because I mean the guy was special ever since he made his NFL debut week 1 in 2017. But even with the departure of DeAndre Hopkins, and yes, I hated that move. I said to myself, I want to see if Deshaun is going to have an opportunity to elevate his game, because I'm not going to say any quarterback can look good playing alongside D-Hop, but I mean, if you're already that good of a quarterback and you have D-Hop, of course, everything is going to get great. Mm-hmm. Going into the 2020 campaign, I wanted to see whether or not he was still able to take another leap. And Quincy, he did. Like his last year, and basically in the league, the guy threw for almost 5,000 yards. His last game with the Houston Texans, he completed 28 out of 39 passes, threw for 365 yards, 3 touchdowns, 1 interception, and the Houston Texans only lost that game by 3. And they only lost because they couldn't stop Derrick Henry running. I believe that was his second game where he eclipsed over 200 yards on the ground against the Texans. So the things this man can do on the field is special. And even though he's not here in the city of Houston, I'm just hoping that he doesn't lose that the talent that made him one of the best quarterbacks in the league. Because when I heard Cleveland was getting into the mix and everything, knowing what you guys got on defense, of course, the run game, this will by far be the best rushing attack that Deshaun has played with. I said to myself, if he can replicate or come close to what he did in 18, 19, and 20, Cleveland is going to be a very dangerous team.
Yeah, and I try to tell people too, because I think we look at quarterbacks and sometimes we look at these stats and we think that's the only thing that impacts the game. But if you can hear when you hear the Browns players talk about oh, he's practicing. Oh, wait till he get back. I think our guard Wyatt Teller was talking about they not stacking the box no more. Like immediately they beat Tampa Bay, and then that's the first thing he was talking about was, hey, look, next week they ain't gonna be able to stack them boxes no more. You know what I mean?
You can't.
And I don't think people understand just Jacoby Brissett, who has been playing well. I think he's 7th in QBR this year, and Kevin has done a really good job putting him in positions for success. But there is a big difference between the presence that Jacoby Brissett creates and just putting number 4 out there. The stress that puts on the defense, because now you got to worry about him running. You got to worry about him throwing. He's a 3-level thrower. He's very accurate. Arm strength is a little bit underrated with him. Throw on the run ability, very smart guy. Like you can also slip tight ends around. He's really good at finding his tight ends, getting the ball to great launch angles for his guys. And you can just imagine if when you're a linebacker, when you're playing Jacoby Brissett, trigger downhill quick, find a hole, look for 24, and then you're going to be fine. And for Nick Chubb's whole career, it's been about getting to Nick Chubb, right? Georgia, Jake Fromm wasn't taking no attention away from him. High school, I promise you, whoever he was his high school quarterback threw the ball 3 times a game, right? You know what I mean? So now he's the first time in his life, the linebacker has to look at that backfield and go, I don't know, who am I worried about right now? You know what I mean? So that's going to do wonders for both of them, because these are elite level players. Like they can take advantage of that. Also for the sideline, because I know our defense has been very up and down, and I think that's putting it nicely this year. But every single former NFL player I've ever talked to tells me, look, man, it's different when you feel like you got that quarterback on your team, right? Like the effort is different. When you feel like you could just win every game because you have one of those guys, and it's clear. I've not heard a single former player that's like, oh, Deshaun's actually overrated. Like every single former player is like, no, y'all don't understand how good he is. Like, I was listening to Mark Ingram talk to Amari Cooper. He's like, oh, you about to get Deshaun. Hey, look, that boy really good. Like, you know what I mean? Like everybody who's ever been in the league is like, no, y'all don't get it. He's really good.
When I tell you, Quincy, and for your listeners and viewers out there, Deshaun was one special talent. And I say was because I don't know what he's going to be like because he has missed 2 years. I don't think that's going to hamper his game. But the thing, like one of my favorite moments in Deshaun with the Texans were he can also, even when you were down, the game was never over with him. Mm-hmm. And one of my favorite moments was the 2019 wild card game when they played against the Bills. And I believe at the time the Texans were down like 17-3 or something like that midway through the third quarter. And to understand how special he is, and this is my favorite Deshaun Watson moment. I can't remember which two defensive tackle it was, but they literally just blew past the Texans O-line and they like double sacked him. But he got out of the double sack. Like they just boom, boom. He got out of it. And I believe he had hit connected with Carlos Hyde. And Carlos Hyde was able to take it to the house for like, I believe it was like 20 yards or whatever. And that was the start of the comeback. There was another game. I'm pretty sure everybody know you was playing against the Las Vegas Raiders. He got out of a sack, got kicked in the eye, and was still able to throw a touchdown to Darren Fales. So it's just like, when I tell you the hype and everything about Deshaun Watson, on the field, of course, it's real. It's something special. And like I say, if he can replicate what he did in Houston, in Cleveland, you guys are going to be very dangerous in the AFC.
Yeah, and I tell fans, like, here's how you could tell, right? Because whenever you hear players, right, if they don't think the quarterback's that much different than the backup, they'll say stuff like, hey, man, next man up when it comes to that, obviously, but we just going to be able to move on and we're going to be doing the same thing. When they ask about the shot, they're not like, hey, man, it's just we're going to go on to the next guy, and it's going to be, no, they're like, yeah, like they can't contain themselves, right? Like that's how you know what they're seeing in that practice bubble, right? When they're actually working on that game plan. And he must have had a series of practices the last couple of weeks because like you saw the excitement level from the players go from like, oh, yeah, to hey, man, if we could just get one more win, we might be able to run this table out and get to 10 wins here when we get Deshaun back. And I was like, oh, okay. Yeah, he looks like Deshaun in that bubble. Like when they're practicing, when he's doing scout team stuff, he clearly looks like Deshaun because there is no hesitation there. Even a dude like Nick Chubb who doesn't talk, he was like, yeah, man, y'all gonna see. And I was like, okay, he must look fine when they're doing their stuff there. But I do think also with every player, like every player has that stuff that they do where it's like, hey, look, they're so good, you don't really worry about it. But these are things that they're gonna do that are gonna bug you during the course of the game. I guess my best guess for Deshaun is sometimes he does hold the ball on long because he is capable of making those plays and he will take some sacks. Like what are the things with Deshaun that are like the little things that like that maybe they might pop up early? You're like, okay, look, this is just something that happens, but trust me, it's worth waiting out for with him.
That was my only negative analysis of Deshaun when he was here in Houston. And it's because he held on to the ball so long because he was that special. I mean, like I mentioned, there were times where he would literally create something out of nothing. That's all I can say. And it seems like a lot of times where he will hold on to the ball too long, and that will result in him taking a lot of too many unnecessary hits. Or, you getting sacked and you losing 5 additional yards where it's like, okay, Deshaun, nothing was there. You could have just threw the ball out of bounds, boom, 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 But now because of your inability to get rid of the ball quickly, you holding on to the ball or whatever the case might be, now you're looking at 2nd and 15, 3rd and 20 or something like that. But that was the only negative. But once again, because Deshaun was so special, that was one of the moments where you're like, everybody not perfect. So I'm okay with that. Go ahead and hold on to the ball. Just make sure if you get hit, you don't get hurt. Speaking of injuries, that was another concern of Deshaun Watson. I mean, you're looking at a guy who had not one but 2 ACL tears in his career as of right now. So, that was like the only 2 negatives that you can really think of in terms of what was the bad part of Deshaun Watson.
So what do Texas fans expect? Like, I want to know, like, honestly, what are they expecting this to be like kind of on the LeBron? Like every time LeBron came to Cleveland, we would boo him and he would get 60 and we would just be like, all right, I guess this is what it is, right? Until he came back. And now you notice he came back. We don't boo LeBron no more. We don't do that.
I mean, that's because he did something. He came back,
won the championship.
Brought y'all a championship.
Yeah. And we were like, all this, because like it was easy to buy it. Also, you gotta remember too, 2010 Bron, it was easy to buy into all the Skip Bayless talking points in 2010 because he ain't won a championship yet. He didn't have his jumper. Yeah, like it was easier. But like after 2018, when he took like nothing and just went to the finals with it, that was like when I was like, you ain't telling me nothing about him, man. He's at worst the second best player of all time. But it's like, what do Texas fans feel like are going to happen? Do they feel like this is going to be Deshaun comes back, or are they leaning on he's going to be rusty, he's going to look bad, and we're going to be able to sneak one out on Cleveland?
Well, they don't think you're going to be able to sneak one out on Cleveland. Everybody, including myself, look, Deshaun is going to be rusty. Let's face it. I mean, the guy on Sunday will mark 700 days since his last regular season game. So, I'm not expecting Deshaun to go out there and be the 3-time Pro Bowl quarterback that he was here in Houston, at least for Sunday. Now, if y'all come back to NRG Stadium next year, then maybe that might be a whole different story where he might throw for 500 yards or something like that. But on Sunday, man, I think that Deshaun isn't going to, like I say, be the quarterback that he was the last time we saw him. He's going to look rusty, but I still think the Cleveland Browns are going to win because y'all do have a running back named Nick Chubb who has rushed for over 1,000 yards already. He has not 1, not 2, not 3, not 4, not 5, but 6 games where he has eclipsed over 100 yards. And I believe after the results of Sunday's game, that is going to become 7. But I would say is, I think this is going to be a game more so. Everybody expecting this being a game more so to understand how bad things here in the city of Houston. Quincy, people are calling this a scrimmage for Deshaun, for him to get accustomed to his wide receiving core, for him to get accustomed to the play calling, for him to get accustomed to the running, to the rushing attack he's playing with. Like, that's how bad the Houston Texans are as of right now. And I'm thinking the same thing. And that's why I really don't see Deshaun Watson going out there and, being the 3-time Pro Bowl quarterback he was here in Houston, at least on Sunday. But, it's going to be a decent game from Deshaun. Like I don't want to sit here and say that he's about to explode. Like I say, maybe next year if y'all come to NRG, he would.
It's definitely going to be an interesting game. It's probably the most interesting 1:00 Sunday game of the year, right? I don't think anything else has been as interesting as this one. But Coty, I want to thank you for coming on here. Make sure y'all check him out. Locked On Texas, also at SI, the Texans at SI. He also covers the Houston Rockets. I know some of y'all watched my Cavs video, so if y'all want to hear about how the second pick of the draft, because there's also been a beef going on between Cleveland fans and Houston fans, the Evan Mobley, Jalen Green thing that fans been arguing about.
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie. I was part of the Evan Mobley train. I think that's what they was calling, but that guy Jalen Green, something special, man.
He was like the number one. Like he was supposed to go number 1 in that draft class before Cade came out. But he didn't go to Duke. He didn't play college, and then he ended up doing the G League thing. And then that kind of, I don't know if that did good or bad things for his stock, but he just didn't look as good because he was just playing against grown men. I always felt like he was good. I remember the hype.
watching Jalen Green's development, man. That's another reason why I'm disappointed that the Davis Mills thing didn't work out, because I was looking at this from a standpoint, man, I got, Jalen over here, Davis Mills over here. I'm being able to see the rise of two really good players. Oh, well, thankfully, Jalen Green kept up the end of his bargain.
Maybe you get Bryce Young and CJ or something like that in the draft.
Yeah, and then I'll be back on that train again.
You'll be back up. Well, I want to thank you for coming on. Thank you for taking the time out. Appreciate you. For everybody else, y'all have a great day. Have a good night.